Oh, who get hype? Who get hype? I get hype. I get hype. Welcome back. It is the Heroic Council, episode number 1. I am your host for today. My name is Jeff Gibbard, and I'd like to take all the attention off of me and bring in my 3 other council members. What up, council members?
Whoop, whoop,
hey.
All right, for those who don't remember your names and faces, and since we are not using lower thirds or icons today for undisclosed reasons, let's all introduce ourselves. So who wants to go first? Raise your hand, jump in.
Tim.
Hi, my name is Timothy Yuli from Yuli Creative.
Gonna have to make sure we gotta rein you in, Tim. You're a little rambunctious today. All right, Parshell, you go next.
What's up, Parshell Tashi, captain at 36,000 Feet, which is a education and consulting company focused around building video culture for teams of all sizes. So, yeah, that's
Love
me.
Love it. And then today's featured guest. We bounce around to different roles today. I'm the host, and today our featured guest, who's going to be the primary person driving the content of today's show, is none other than Sarah. Sarah, please introduce yourself.
So I am Sarah Ohanesian. I'm a productivity coach, and I own a business called So Productive, which is my initials. Sometimes that takes people a second. So has 2 meanings.
There it is. All right, so today we have a fun little topic ahead of us, and one that I think is extremely relevant, obviously, for the time and place that we are in October of 2020, the year of our demise. Man, this year is really something, isn't it?
Wow.
It's just weighing on me. It's something.
It's like, what?
Yeah. It's like, what was it? All year, like every month, there was like a different thing, right? Like we had like the murder hornets phase, and like, aren't we still waiting on it? Isn't there like an asteroid month coming? Like there's like a giant asteroid coming through. I don't know. Anyway, that's
Awesome.
it.
Thank you for that information. Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Very awesome, no? But we're here to address a later topic, which is productivity during the pandemic, which I think is going to be a really interesting place for us to go. So to start things off, let's just kind of like take stock of where we've all been in this whole thing. Parshell, how have you been dealing with the whole pandemic thing? How's it affected your business? How have you taken to work? What does your workday look like? How's it affecting you? Kind of take that away.
Yeah, it's funny for me. I realized going through the pandemic and being shut down, how much I am already at home. It just became, something that was more in my awareness. And I realized how much of a homebody I am. So that was interesting. But as far as business is concerned, I mean, we did have some in-person events that we were going to be producing and working on, but those got canceled. A lot of things were just kind of up in the air. And the pivot for me has been in just teaching and training and empowering other people when it comes to video. So that's been a big shift in terms of business, but has really just made me more aware of myself. And, because you're just at home or you're in office more than usual. So what I've done is really taken the opportunity just in my office space and where I'm at just to like move things around. Like I added this it looks like it's a little recliner chair in here, but it's like my little reading section. Like I have multiple sections in this small room just because of this pandemic, just so I can just have my places to move and to be. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it's just really been about awareness. Like I'm just more aware of my behavior. I'm more aware of, how much I do work from home and how I actually work. So it's really put a lot of focus on that.
It's funny you mentioned that because when I was at WeWork, I used to find myself so I had an office, but like I would find that like days I would work in like my actual office, and there were days where like I need a change of scenery, and I would go to like one of the chairs in one area of the building, and then maybe I'd be like, hey, no, I'm tired of this, and I would go to like the beanbag room or something. And it's funny because like you've done that like in the room that you're in, right? And
yeah,
it's interesting because my office is in like the corner of my living room. So it's like almost like I don't want to go anywhere else because then like other places will become work. So like there's like the kitchen table. I'm like, but that's where I enjoy my delicious foods. So it's that's been challenging for me. Is like now I feel stuck in this one spot. Although I do like this little corner nook, but yours looks so much more pleasant. Like the color of it, the little reading nook, it's nice. I feel trapped here. Tim, what's it been like for you? You've been, not only have you been working from home, but you've also had to move in the midst of all of this. So what's it been like for you to kind of change the way you've been working throughout this pandemic?
Yeah, it's been it's been a kind of a bipolar experience. Because in some ways, there's a lot of aspects of my life that are going really, really well. But then in other ways, I don't want to say things are going poorly, but this has definitely been like a stressful, anxious period of time. Like most people, when the pandemic started, I remember I think it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday when all my clients called me on the same day to literally cancel everything on that same day. And that was really stressful because I'd spent probably the last 4 to 6 years working on building up about 6 years working to building up a client base. And on the same day, everybody's just like, all right, we're shutting down everything. So that was pretty terrifying. But I took advantage of the situation. My girlfriend and I had been planning on moving together, and I was planning on moving from Philly to Queens at some point. We took the opportunity and the cheap rents in New York to find a place in Queens. And that's been absolutely great. I have a much bigger space than I had before. It's really beautiful. It's been a lot of fun. It's been really great living with Christina. Work started picking up around the same time in July, so that's been pretty good. So I've been very lucky in comparison to what's happening with a lot of people out there. So I'm really grateful for that. Also hyper mindful that who knows how things are going to go next year, But at the moment, work has been really great. It's definitely, I used to do a lot more on-set shooting. But now I'm doing a lot more people will send me footage or they'll want something just completely animated. I'm doing a lot more web stuff and graphic design stuff. So so I'm lucky that I had those skills. I can make that pivot and that people knew I could do that stuff and started asking me to do that stuff. So that's been great. But this month I'm doing a lot more live shooting on location. I don't think that's going to last very long because I think this winter is going to shut things down again. But I'm taking advantage of the next month and getting some shoots in there, which is nice because I haven't really been on location for a shoot since early March, maybe even February. So yeah, looking forward to the next couple of weeks.
It's interesting. Both you and Parshell, so much of your work is work that is very tangible. You can kind of virtually touch it.
Yeah.
They're deliverable. And Parshell and I, before we jumped on this, we were talking about Enneagrams, and I was talking about, I just recently redid the 16 personalities test, and my Myers-Briggs has changed. But in it, one of the questions that I remember was could you devote your life to work that you can't tangibly touch or feel? And I realized that my work can be done from really anywhere with a Zoom connection because so little of what I give to people is outside of us having a conversation and breaking things down and whiteboarding out ideas. But it's interesting, when, you have people sending you footage that's potentially multiple gigabytes in size. And you have to do something with it and then you have to send it back. It's such an interesting thing to think about that there's so many people that their careers are so vastly different. I'm thinking about people in construction or people who work in there's any number of different things where we lost Tim. He's coming back, I'm sure. There's just a number of different types of things where it's you really can't do your job remotely. So it's interesting. So today, Sarah, we're going to talk about this whole world of being in a pandemic. Before you get started, why don't you talk a little bit about what your experience has been, the people that you're working with, kind of the lay of the land, and why you think it's important for us to address this 5 hacks of staying productive during a pandemic.
Yeah, totally. So, and for me personally, what's been crazy is if you follow me on Instagram, we have a puppy, and I call him the productivity puppy, but he is not that at all. And it's been interesting for me, someone who loves structure and knowing when I'm going to be working on something. This has been really a time of just some unknowns, and sometimes the phone rings and I got to take care of something different. And I think the structure of the day has changed. And for me, having that puppy, it's well, now you have to go out. I'm in the middle of something. Stop what you're doing. So it's a funny minor adjustment, but it's actually really affects that flow of your work and your day. So that's me personally. What I'm seeing overall is just this really large shift in how work, home, and family is balanced, and it's not, right? right? So more about alignment than balance, certainly. And so many companies right now are extending work from home. They're saying work from home for the foreseeable future. I know schools in our area are considering going back in November, but some are not. Some districts and companies have cut the number of employees overall, but then they're also asking employees to do more work, less resources and people. But I've also heard from the employer side, they want to help, but they're not sure how. Like, nobody likes this situation, and I think that that's important to recognize. This is versus employers. This is something that it's new for everybody, and we're all trying to navigate this new change together. So I'm getting a lot of commentary and feedback around that.
Yeah, I've heard the term new normal tossed around a lot. And it's interesting because it feels so much like what we're going through right now is not actually like a stable normal. Like, this is the normal. It's like we are in between to what the world is going to look like. There's like what we knew it was going to be. And then there's like what it is now, which I think will be slightly different than what it will become, but it won't be what it was. So it's like adapting to this new normal is kind of like trying to stand on constantly shifting earth under your feet. So I think it's really important for us to talk about kind of how we shift our perspective and how we kind of take the old rules and apply them to what's happening now. So let's start by talking a little bit about what you think are some of the things that are like the groundwork for trying to be sort of, I guess, prepared for how things have changed, how things will probably continue to change, and sort of like what's a way to build a strong foundation for everybody moving forward.
Well, I think what's really important is to recognize that this is a season we are in. And so often we think about seasons as like, it's fall now and it's about to be winter and the weather physically changes. But a season can be a moment. It can be like, I lived in it, like he switched states that he lived in. And there's seasons that we go through in life, and this is one of them. And it's okay to have emotions with that, right? This isn't nothing. This isn't something that everybody in the world isn't dealing with in some capacities. I think it's just important to say, this is tough, and that's okay to feel that way. The other really important thing is to think about that you're comparing so often to your past life. I used to travel. I used to go to this beautiful office. I used to have a nanny. I used to have childcare. That's just not the way it is. So it's really unfair to compare our life right now to our past life, because it's gone, and it's okay. Like, celebrate that time, but now use that energy instead of grieving the past to really think about, let's embrace the future and new opportunities coming out of this time. And I think that's a really important shift in perspective.
Yeah, I agree. So I've been working for myself since 2011. So for me, working from home, it wasn't like that was like an enormous shift, because there was a period prior to having my own office when I had my agency where like it was very remote, worked from home. Most of my team worked remote. And then there came a point where we got offices, and then like we had office space for a while. And then when I got acquired, I was in offices, but I could work from home. So like I've had this kind of flexible work from home. Tim Parshell, what's your situation on that? Like, how long have you guys been doing the work from home thing versus going into traditional offices? I mean, Tim, I'm more familiar with what your situation is, but Parshall, I'll start with you, and then Tim, just quickly comment on what it's been like for both of you.
Yeah, it definitely, because we worked together, Jeff. So I remember kind of having that flexibility of like, seeing each other there and just working there, sometimes to the late night and then going home. Like there was a point I went through different phases. At one point it was like, I'm working way too much at home. Maybe it's too distracting. I need to get a space. And then getting into a space and getting used to that. And then going back to working at home more. And just like how, as the business evolved, and especially when I moved, I didn't want to get an office space out here. I just decided to kind of keep everything just as lean as I could. And that meant just working from home. So I definitely adopted that since moving to California. Like, I've just had a place here to work. And it got very interesting. At some point, I started kind of asking my friends, not necessarily, hey, let's go have lunch and coffee just to get together. I'm like, hey, we should like get together and like bring our laptops and our books and things we're working on. And then we should like work together. And like, I was trying to do different things like that just to get out a little bit more. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've even now just working at home, like I have so much here. I really, like, if I were to leave, I wouldn't have act like my camera situation, everything would be different. So that kind of makes me a little bit nervous. But at the end of the day, working at home and just having this functionality here is, I like it. I do like it, and I do enjoy at the same time too, just connecting with other people to work. And right now I just have to do that virtually, or in person when I can. So
yeah, you were like inventing like officeless co-work. Basically. Tim, what about you? I know for the most part you've been working remotely for a long time, but how have you been kind of managing that? Have you been, have you created for yourself like dedicated workspaces, or are you in any way just kind of like bouncing around and trying to work from various places? And obviously in the pandemic, you're kind of, quarantined to home, but how have you been managing this over the years?
So yeah, I've been working at home for a long time. So like the exceptions are like, am I on location for a shoot, or am I meeting with somebody to plan something? Or I think the biggest change has been networking, because between going to networking events, meeting with people, that I connect with for coffee or lunch, it's so weird to think that was like I would probably do that like 2 or 3 times a week back, and that's how I really built like my network. And I'm gonna say, yeah, the biggest change is really I've become my network has become a lot more like small but tighter, if that makes sense. Like I don't think I reach out as much as I did, just because like I don't know, I don't really like Zoom networking, for instance, like big Zoom webinars. Like I feel like there's not really an opportunity to have like one-on-one conversations, because like I feel like that's typically where I make the most headway with building relationships. So I feel like if I was just starting out, this would be really hard, because I wouldn't have that network already developed. And so like getting started now in particular, like I would have to like think really hard and find like some new strategies to figure out how to do that, because that seems really challenging for people who are just getting started in particular.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting with that is there was no transition. It wasn't like, let's all take 2 weeks and get our office spaces set up. It was like the governor said, you can't go in tomorrow. And I mean, we left an office space at 3 o'clock and never back, so I think that's what some people have dealt with. This was just very abrupt.
Yeah, and not only that, but like a lot of companies are just like, even after a lot of the restrictions have been lifted, they're like we're just making it permanent. A
lot of that has changed. Sarah, you now that you said that, you kind of doubly reminded me. Not only did you sort of voluntarily move into your own new environment of working from home, working for yourself, and all the things you're doing there, but like you came from an environment that was vastly different. You were there for a very long time, where you went into the office every day, and now you're kind of shifting. So one, you shifted out of, you would have had to kind of shift anyway if you were still, working for another company. But now that you work for yourself, there's sort of like a double thing there. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the things that you've learned, that you've implemented to try and stay productive as far as your workspace, now that you're not only choosing to work from home, but also relegated to working from home?
Totally. And actually, Jeff, that's a good lead in, because that is actually hack number 1. So I'll get right into it. I think what's interesting about this dedicated space is that it's dedicated, right? That's the key. And the dedication of a space has really two reasons for that. One is a signal to those around you that this is a work time. I am working now. And the other is that a space actually provides you with a process and a state of flow in your space. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but setting up a space to be, Parshall mentioned it, so it functions well for your habits and the tasks that you actually need to accomplish. Like your workspace shouldn't be this drop zone for everyone putting their things in your house. You really do need like a sacred space that is yours. So that is hack number 1. And there's two parts of that also, the physical, but also the mental. So physically having a space, and again, not everyone has the luxury of having an office with a door and a big huge desk, but even a corner, a section of a table, an area. I've talked with other people about how they can like pardon off a section of a room, but having that space. And the hard thing is the kitchen counter isn't it, right? The kitchen is the hub of the home. It's a main thoroughfare. Everybody wants to be in there grabbing something to eat. So, setting up a workspace in a kitchen, for example, can be be a real challenge. But having that space that is out of the family hub area, and then moving clutter space, because the clutter actually takes up so much physical and mental space. Yeah. Oh, did you want to say something?
No, I just said amen.
Oh yeah.
100% on that one. The clutter it invades my ability to think. But yeah, 100% on that one. Sorry.
Totally. And I think it's to have things that are, like you're going to touch all the time. I'm going to need access to pens. For me, I have puppy treats, a mason jar, because my puppy's going to come in and disrupt me and I want to give him a treat. So like, what are those things that you're going to reach for all the time? But then getting the rest of the stuff out of your way, because you're actually taking brain power to think and process about all the stuff that's around you. So less stuff can really be helpful in those situations. Cleaning up your desk at the end of the day is another really important tip. That just when you walk into your physical space in the morning, and again, whether that's a small section of a table even, it's clear, because mentally you want to come into the day like fresh and ready to go. So the other thing of space is making sure that it makes you feel positive and creative and alive. Like the bills shouldn't be all over your space, or all the to-dos that you have to do. So cleaning out that space to ensure that your brain is ready to work when you get into that physical environment.
Got it. So to recap, hack number 1 is about creating your dedicated space. And some of the main points of that would be that you want to make sure that physical space is, 1, a signal to other people that you are in work mode. So on the one hand, just having that space alone can be a signal to those that are in your environment, because we're all cooped up at home together, that this is a time when I'm working. So you create your physical space for that. And then some of the keys to making sure that physical space are as effective as they can be is making sure that they are, 1, a place that you want to go to and feel comfortable working. So you set that up however that makes sense to you. Like I always have a calendar right here that my wife makes for me every year that has pictures of us, and it makes me smile during the day. But also just making sure that you have it cleaned off so that you're able to think and not have things distracting you when you need to get things done. So make sure that the bills aren't around, make sure that you're not using it as a catch-all for everything, but rather a space where you can get things done. Did I miss anything in my recap of point number 1?
That was perfect.
Solid. Well, let's move on to point number 2, because I think, it's very easy to get caught up in the discussion of all the things that we're doing, working from home and everything. Let's make sure we get through these hacks, and we'll leave ourselves some time for discussion anyway. So what's hack number 2?
Hack number 2 is to manage expectations. And the best way to manage expectations is to, 1, set boundaries, which is, people kind of get that concept, but 2 is to communicate those boundaries, which is actually a step that gets missed quite a lot. So communicating those to your family, your children, your boss, your coworkers, even your clients. And so when we're not sure what we're supposed to be doing and like, what are these expectations, we always feel guilty, like I'm not doing enough, or I'm not good enough, or maybe I should be answering email at 10 o'clock, so at PM. And that's when those boundaries really come into play. So setting boundaries is really critical, especially right now. Just because you are working in your house, it does not mean that you should be working all the time, or that your whole life is this jumbled mess of work and family and home, right? So it really is important to separate these things. So we talked about the physical workspace, and again, putting that physical barrier up. I've got headphones on, I'm working now, I'm closing the door. I'm going to coordinate with my partner about childcare or pet care. I actually took my dog today to Buckingham Palace so he could spend the day. But that was a way for me to set a boundary for myself. It said, I can't have interruptions right now. Other big way to set boundaries is to have a start and a time. It is very easy when we have no physical workspace that we're living and needing to commute back to home. It's very easy to just go from one to the next and bring your phone with you, and now your work comes right with you. So now you're having a family meal and your phone goes off and you're right back into work mode. So knowing when you're going to stop working for the day is really important. Another one is modes of communication. What tools are you going to be using? Are you going to be using email at certain times of the day? Are you going to be on Slack certain times of the day? What is an appropriate way that you want people to be communicating with you? Can they Facebook message you, and that's the way that your team thinks that you're going to communicate? So boundaries around the modes of communication. also important. And then what days you're going to be taking meetings and what days you'll be working on certain initiatives. So to do this, it's really important to collaborate with your team. I think it's often, I'm setting a boundary now, but nobody knows what you're doing afternoon because you set a boundary, but you didn't tell anyone that you were going to be having those boundaries in place Thursday noon, right? So now people are like, where did she go? But rather, what's important here is to communicate those boundaries so people know, oh, it's Thursday afternoon. She blocked out time to get her most productive work done that time, and everybody knows about it. So collaborating with your team, your superiors on what is important, what's expected of me, what is the organization think is right in this case, and having conversations around this, because there is no right way to set boundaries, but there is definitely a wrong way, and the wrong way to not communicate and talk about it and collaborate together.
Yeah, every single bit of that. And I think the setting expectations piece combined with what are all of those different habits that you put yourself into so that you can make sure you adhere to that. So as everyone on the council probably knows, like I set some very stringent boundaries right in my onboarding email with clients where I'm like, I work between this time and this time. I work with clients on these days and these days. The best way to get a hold of me is this and this. I will not respond to anything outside of these hours. So like I set those things. One area where, as you were talking, I was thinking a boundary that I could set because I don't do it in my physical boundary is I could turn off my computer at a certain point because in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, one of the things he talks about is that in the science of making and breaking habits, if you want to break a habit, one of the things you have to do is actually make it more difficult for you to do the thing. And if you want to make a habit easier, you make it easier, or if you want to do a habit, you want to make it easier and easier to do, right? So like if you want to get dressed as soon as you wake up in the morning, you set out your clothes the night before, right? And if you want to stop smoking, you put it inside of a box, inside of another box with a lock and key. And then you put that under a combination lock and then you give that key to somebody else, right? So if I were to shut off my computer, I'm actually giving myself a hack now for that physical space. So just to recap, point 2 is managing the expectations, setting the boundaries for others. That could be your boss. It could be your partner. It could be anybody in your life. And then also doing all the things that you can to ensure that you adhere to those boundaries. So a question for the other members of the council is, what steps have you all been taking to set those boundaries, manage those boundaries, or do you find that this is a wake-up call for you that you need to set better boundaries? Tim, let's start with you.
That's a great question. So I've historically probably been not so great about setting boundaries. I think and because I've been kind of working at home for a while, like I think the biggest area in my life is setting boundaries specifically for myself rather than necessarily my clients. In the sense that like I'm very easily distracted, so making sure like I don't have access to, or I limit my access to like the internet and use professionally related while I'm doing work is a big one. As far as like outward facing, I definitely have because my clients require a lot of meetings. So I make sure to like, if we're doing a meeting, we have it first thing in the morning or at like 4 o'clock before work's over, because usually if I have a meeting in the middle of the day, that's going to break up my work, and it's going to be hard for me to get back in and out. I'm going to lose additional time just getting back in and out of work. And then finally, something that, I've been talking with Jeff and Sarah about a lot lately. Oh, God. Sorry.
You're still here.
My screen disappeared. Something I've been talking a lot about with Sarah and Jeff lately is time blocking. Time blocking is a great like non-physical way to set boundaries for yourself, just so you're getting certain things done and you don't feel like, as I might often feel like I have to look at all my emails, but I also have to, do client work, but I also have to, do some stuff around the house and et cetera, et cetera. So, and if I'm doing one thing, I feel guilty about not doing the other two things and vice versa. So like time blocking is a great way for myself to set boundaries, being like, okay, this is the time allocated to this, so I don't have to feel guilty about not doing the other stuff that I should be doing. There's probably more, but at the moment, those are the things that come to mind.
Love it. And those are all really good points. And I think they're going to nicely lead into Sarah's next point. But Parshell, I'll give you a chance to chime in on that. What have you been doing to set the boundaries? Or is this a wake-up call for you to set boundaries?
Yeah, I've actually, in some very interesting ways, been using a light to put outside of my door. And it's been really helpful. So actually, it's one of the ones that comes with a remote. So I'm able to like change the color. I don't know if that shows up red, but this is supposed to be red. Anyway, But I put this outside of my door because, for one, our bathroom is right here next to it. So I've been on some calls and it's like you hear a random toilet flush or like whatever. So I've had to put something like this up. And this is like a form of a boundary, if you will, or at least communication out to my partner and anybody else who's here that like, red means I'm recording. Green means you can still come in, you know. And then I'm like coming up with these codes and like ways to signal what it means. But this has been a really good boundary for me because it is distracting. Like if she comes in or whatever. So I recommend this, like something like this.
Great idea.
And I love that.
Right here, I can just hit the remote. Like I'm all techie in here. It's so funny. Right. So I hit the remote like I'm on live.
That's awesome. I like
what is that light called? What was that?
It's one of these Amazon things, but it clicks on, so I can. It's one of those press ones or whatever, and it comes with the remote. So I'll see if I can find an Amazon link to include with this episode, so you guys can.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it in the show notes so people have it.
I love that. I think that is huge, and that's the communication piece. And again, that's the part people are missing. It's like, well, I'm going live. Oh, but you didn't tell anyone in your house you were doing that, so it's not really their fault that they walked in. They didn't know. And I think that is really important.
Yeah, and I think kind of to bundle to the point that Tim made and the point that Parshell made into kind of leading you into your next point, I think, which is understanding what your priorities are being one piece and then communicating that outward. And the better you can plan for that, obviously, the better you can communicate that out to the people who are around you. So what's hack and / tip number 3? Yeah,
and it is. Tim said it. It's about getting clarity, and clarity is the key to productivity. It's everything, and it actually, I believe clarity so much. I have a productivity system called CODE, and the C is clarity. And we often get stuck in the weeds with our work. We get so fixated on all the problems at hand that we end up just working harder and harder to solve those problems as they're popping up. And we aren't really moving ahead. And so I often equate this to being like a game of whack-a-mole that will never end. So instead of a new project or a mole presenting itself, I challenge you to just take a step back from the whack-a-mole game and ask 2 critical questions. And those 2 questions are what and why. And what is such a simple question, but it is often missed. So it's literally asking when a new project comes up, what is it? And it is amazing to me how often that step gets missed. And what does that project entail? What will make that project successful? What are the outcomes, the goals, and the expectations of that project? And getting really specific here. During my marketing career, I saw this step. It really missed time and time again, and this lack of clarity can just be paralyzing and lead to a host of other miscommunication issues. But by asking what you're really taking the guesswork out of what the scope of a project is, and so you're not wasting time trying to figure that out later on. So the other question is why. And when we're kids, we often hear, because I said so, or that's the way we've always done it. But I want you to think like toddler here. When someone asks you to do something, really question why. Jeff did an exercise with me once and he asked me why 12 times, and eventually I was like, Jeff, I don't know anymore. We went too deep. But asking why is just mission critical to get all of this clarity and all the reasons why you're doing in alignment. And it actually causes employees a lot of stress and procrastination. But people don't want to procrastinate, but they often don't know why they're doing something, and that lack of a mission really is a lot of procrastination. So next time you're presented with a new project, a new task, a new challenge, just what and why.
So I think one of the reasons why that's such a good piece of advice in the midst of these 5 tips for staying productive during a pandemic is that we're all dealing with so much other emotional stress that comes along with working from home, adapting to a new situation, being in close, cramped quarters, not socializing as much, spending all of this time on Zooms, adapting to a world that, seemingly has all sorts of problems going on while we're, in our little bubbles at home. That I think adding this step of trying to bring some mental clarity in the midst of all of this otherwise hazy kind of fog, is almost tantamount to being called a hack, right? Like to kind of hack your way out of the fog, to ask the questions that help you get clarity on like why we're doing things. What is it that we're actually doing? What are we trying to accomplish? Asking all of those questions, I think, are absolutely critical to it. So at this point now, if we were to recap just kind of where we've been, you've got this dedicated workspace at home where it's cleaned off. You've got a nice place for yourself to think. You're, setting clear expectations to those around you, to your clients. So now you've really carved out a sanctuary for yourself at home. And then as work comes into this sanctuary, you're getting clarity on what it is, why it exists. And it's almost a way to be able to return to normal, to have yourself operating in this new normal in some way. But you still have other things to do. And your next tip, I think, is going to give people some very actionable advice on what to do once you've gone through those 3 steps. What's next?
All right. So tip hack number 4 is to commit to 3 priorities for tomorrow. And there's a lot of neuroscience and research on why the number is 3. But what I recommend people do is to combat that overwhelm of this big to-do list. I have so much to do. Is to take 15 minutes at the end of your day and think of it like a cool down period. It's almost like a cool down period from a hard workout. You wouldn't just spin the treadmill and then stop and get off. Like your heart rate would be soaring, you would be dizzy, you might pass out. So instead, what you do at the end of a workout is you cool down, and your heart rate, your blood pressure, your body can really normalize again. And it's the same thing for the end of your day. So taking a couple minutes to reflect on what you did that day that was probably pretty awesome. Probably just a couple of great things, and celebrating that just for a few moments, but then also picking 3 priorities from your to-do list that you're going to focus on tomorrow. And again, this is a physical action. I have a plethora of Post-it notes that I like to use. But what I do is I do 3 priorities on a Post-it note, and I literally write it on there. I leave it on my computer. And Jeff, to your point from earlier, is shutting down the computer, which is something your computer sometimes goes days without being off. So shutting down those 3 on a Post-it note and putting it right front and center on your desk for tomorrow. Because when you walk in tomorrow, the beautiful thing is you are going to get those 3 things done, and then you are going to feel accomplished. You are going to see all these things coming off your to-do list. You're going to feel successful, impactful, and fulfilled, instead of defeated and overwhelmed that you're not reaching your goals. So it's cool to see that momentum happen. It's like a snowball. If you get those 3 done first thing in the morning, that's time to work on some other things. So 3 priorities on a Post-it for tomorrow.
I absolutely love that. And I love that it actually pairs together with your earlier point about sort of setting your boundaries. Also hilarious that you have the abundance of color-coded notes to go along with that. That makes perfect sense. I love the use of 3 priorities for the next day. I follow a Kanban board method of getting stuff done. And in my limiting work in progress column, the now column, I only allow 3 things in there. And I've always found that number, and it's interesting to know that there's neuroscience behind that, but I find that does really help me stay on point with that, is just to have like the 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really good point. All right. So the final hack, I think really nicely collects up all of what you've already given us and gives you kind of like one final thing to push you into productivity land. So what is the final piece of the 5 productivity hacks?
Well, it's to own your calendar. And so I see a lot of people who do all these steps, but then they're still not getting their work done. They don't have their priorities done. And often the reason is because they actually didn't take time to put it on their calendar and actually do those tasks. Like, they're not going to happen magically. The groceries don't show up in the fridge. You have to go to this and get them. So the best way to accomplish your priorities is structure your day using your calendar, because we've all been to that place where you get to the end of the day and you say, I hardly got anything done today. Like, we've all had that feeling before, and it's likely because of a flexible schedule, and you're letting other people or distractions disrupt day. And so physically putting on your calendar is the difference between getting it done, still having it on your to-do list, because by putting it on your calendar, you're going to prioritize spending that time, and you're actually going to get the work done. And I equate this with, training for a marathon. You cannot just get to the starting line of a marathon this weekend and then finish that intense of a race. Instead, you'll want to do a training program that matches your skill level, and then you'll allot the necessary time each day to train, and you're going to spend time running in months leading up to the race. And it's really the same here with your goals and priorities. You can't just roll up and think they're magically going to happen. You got to put in the time on your calendar. So that's hack number 5.
All right. Question for the council. Anybody here, does that resonate with anybody here about owning your schedule and not letting anybody else take over it?
Oh yeah, because it's like, your time is everything at the end of the day. And I think that for sure the recent event, what's happened in our world is just, I think, put more awareness on your time. Either you were like, dang, I used to do all these other things, now I'm not doing anything at all. Like, what am I doing with my time? And this has been huge for me as well. I think I learned this from Jeff, about like kind of time blocking. So it's like to an extent, I feel less stress about what needs to be done because I've made time for it. It's like, because there's that space there, I just need to show up in that space, and then once I'm there, everything else will work itself out. I can know what I need to do just in that time because it's dedicated for that activity. So in a lot of respects, it's given me peace of mind, because I used to have like to-do lists that were 2-3 columns, of stuff that were not connected. I wasn't necessarily categorized. I'm like, I just know I need to do all these things. And so to know that I have the space to do it now by blocking it off the calendar lets me know it can be done. And at the same time, lets me know that, hey, if I showed up in that time and I did my best, whatever I got done was more than I, had done before. So I can be okay with that. You know what I mean? Like, where else could I get the time to knock out the whole other column? I need to just show up and just keep being there for that time. So that's definitely been helpful for me. And it makes me feel all, special when I look at my little color coordinated calendar now. So it's awesome.
Well, it's an interesting point because you said you make the time for it. And I think that's such a critical distinction between finding the time. Like, oh, I didn't find the time for it. No, you didn't make the time for it, right? So if you set aside the time for it and you show up and you do the thing, to your point, like whatever you get done is more than you would have gotten done had you not set aside and made the time for it. And then there's people like me who just try to do too many things, and it doesn't matter because you can't find the time to make everything work.
Yeah.
And also like if you're working on something particularly ambitious, like it could be like several days to just flesh out like what actually will legitimately go into this ambitious project. And if you don't take that time and view that time as like legitimate work, as like a legitimate part of the project, then like you are going to procrastinate, like because it's like way too big to approach. And that's something that like I get caught up on a lot, is just like whenever I'm doing something that's kind of new and it's like I know how to do it, but it's just there's so many moving parts to this. You know what I mean? Like it, like you and I don't like just jump in and sit down and start like breaking it apart and like looking at each component and how can I make it smaller and smaller. It's going to be like impossible, and then you're going to procrastinate, and then the deadline's going to come closer, and it's not going to be what you wanted it to be, because you didn't like view that period of time of like, how do I like organize what I actually need to get this done. It's just gonna, you're gonna do something, end up doing something like a lot smaller, a lot less ambitious, and you're not going to be as happy with the final results. And it's going to like impact, it definitely will impact your medium term or long term growth in those areas in your work.
Yeah, and related to that, Tim, something that I know that you do, for instance, but I know that also the rest of the people on the council do, is you batch process your work. And I think that's a kind of a big component of what Sarah was just talking about owning your calendars. Like, you actually can't batch process work and do things in big chunks of time. Like your work, for instance, Tim, it's not like you can sit down and edit for 15 minutes. Like, it doesn't work like that. Like, you need to build up some momentum. So that whole time of like setting aside blocks big enough so that you can get into a task and break it apart like you were talking about, but also you have the time to do the work that's necessary so that you're saving yourself time in the long run.
Yeah, like for instance, like right now I'm working on an interactive infographic. It's going to be like on the over the web, and there are like parts of it that are animated in video animation programs, and there's parts of it that are going to be animated in the actual like on like the web platform, you know what I mean, in CSS and HTML and JavaScript and stuff like that. and then there are parts of it that aren't going to be animated. And you know what I mean? There are components of it that I'll just develop. They're just like shapes and stuff that'll just develop like using CSS, and then other stuff that I need to develop in Illustrator or InDesign or, you know, like a video software. And I just have to, like, for instance, just sit down and be like, where am I building which part where? You know what I mean? Like, and that alone, it's not like, I don't know. It's just a lot of work just getting in there and doing those pieces. But if you do those pieces, you'll legitimately be able to do those things, because most things that you do in life are, like, at least in most pieces of work, are like really, really simple. It's just there's a lot of really simple pieces, you know, and you have to like figure out like what those really simple pieces are, because most things really aren't that hard at the end of the day. It's just like knowing how to do the little things and knowing how to do a lot of those little things and how those little things interact with one another.
Yeah, it's like when you actually take, so for instance, like the process of strategy, which I've been doing for 12 years now, it's just taking the big idea of where you want to go and then working backwards from where you're trying to get to and thinking about all of the little steps that go into getting where, like, what is the step that directly precedes that and what precedes that, which takes a lot of time and energy and thinking to actually get through, but it's all little steps. And the idea of doing anything really big is typically, how do you take this and disassemble it into its smallest, most basic components so that you can work on those small basic components? And I think to the point of a lot of what's been said during this, the 5 tips that Sarah gave, a lot of it is really about, like, how do you take these small actions that yield, 5%, 10% better results in all of these different areas? When you combine them all together, you give yourself more mental clarity, you give yourself a greater possibility of results. It all just kind of works together. So just want to quick recap the 5 points that Sarah said today, and then just kind of open up for us to just chat a little bit before we head out for the rest of the day and for next week's episode. But the first is to have yourself a dedicated workspace, and that dedicated workspace is something where you should feel great when you're there. It should be a clean workspace where you're not distracted. It should be one that's a boundary to other people and the signal to other people that you are in when you're working. And that leads into point 2, which is about setting expectations for those around you in your physical space, as well as the clients and people that are virtual, that you're going to be interfacing with, and letting them know where you communicate, when you're on, when you're off. And then also for yourself, setting those expectations and boundaries by doing things like shutting off your computer, putting Post-it notes there for the next day and things like that, just to signal to yourself that it's over and done with for the day. Make sure you get clarity as things come in. That's the 3rd tip, making sure that you understand what it is that you're working on and why it is that you're working on it. It's going to be really helpful to cut through that fog as we're all experiencing that, trying to manage this new normal. We have good days, we have bad days, but making sure to ask that why and what are going to give you the clarity to cut through the noise and have a better sense of what it is that you're working on. And as you do that, you're going to want to make sure, and tip number 4, which is to set 3 priorities for the next day. If you do that consistently every single day, at the very least, you will complete 3 priorities for the very next day. Each and every day, you will finish 3 priorities, and you'll have a sense of accomplishment. You'll feel good about the work that you're doing, and you'll know why you did it and what it is that you're doing. And then finally, of course, is to own your own calendar. Making sure that you know when you're able to work on the things you want to, you're setting aside the time to do creative work, to batch process the things that you're doing, and that you're not letting other people intrude upon the priorities that you have. Kind of to Tim's point, he knows that he doesn't want meetings in the middle of the day because it's going to interrupt his workflow. All of us can take small actions like that to better set expectations with people, own our own calendar, and do our best possible work. So, Sarah, I hope that was a good recap of everything that you talked about today.
Excellent. And I just want to reiterate that point of those small steps. And again, I think people think about productivity often as this overhaul of a system, but it's really not. It's just about doing a little bit better every time you sit down to work or to manage your work and home life. And it's actually easy if you think of it that way. It doesn't have to be a big daunting task.
100% agree. And again, before we jumped on here, I was talking about how my Myers-Briggs profile changed. So I used to be an ENFP, and the difference between P and J for the uninitiated is that typically Ps are the people who just kind of fly by the seat of their pants. They're kind of like all over the place. Whereas Js are very rigid and organized and have task lists and lists for everything. And essentially there was a point in my life where I was just all over the place and I was just this chaotic mess of a person in a good way. I still was very high level. I was able to really think big strategic visionary thoughts, but I often had trouble with the more granular details of things and staying organized and on task and keeping my time oriented. And this is back in like 2012-ish time period where I took that. And then over the years, I've imposed upon myself all of these little changes, trying to be a little bit better about my task list, a little bit better about my calendar, a little bit more organized in how I deal with email. And all of this bit by bit actually changed me from an ENFP to an ENFJ, because now I actually feel quite uncomfortable when I'm not imposing these systems upon myself, because I feel like I'm out of control. Whereas when I impose my task list and I have my calendar, I feel like I'm more able to be deliberate about chasing and going after the goals that I have in life and getting things done. So it's interesting because, to your point, it wasn't like I just one day was like, I'm organized now. It was a very gradual process that probably a free spirit here who needs to be an ENFJ. Right on. What up, Facebook user? So yeah, that was our first chat that came in. We're glad to see you. But yeah, the fact is, like, I didn't just change overnight. I really had to work at that stuff, and I had to study people that knew how to do that. And you do it a little bit here and there, and you get to be the person who now has packing lists for everything and grocery lists, and like everything in my life is now super organized. And I'm still a little bit of a mess, but like it's bit by bit.
Yeah, it's a journey. Yeah,
for sure. So what's everybody else taking away from this? I know for me, one, it's shutting off my computer at the end of the day, but what's everybody else taking away from this?
Yeah, I know for me, or just to give myself the grace to, and like to, I guess, not beat myself up essentially when it comes to getting things done. And like you said, it's a work in progress, and you kind of experiment, and you eventually kind of start to get a groove of what works for you if you, I guess, put that time and attention to it. One thing that I've done, and I've probably done it for like the last couple of months, and it's part of my routine now. I don't know what else to call it because I don't know if it exists. I just kind of come up with stuff. But essentially, I put on a sheet of paper, I make a big circle. And then around the circle, I just put all of the things that are major things I need to make sure are done. And then I kind of create a line, and I basically, it looks like a pie with pie slices. Okay. And then as I proceed through the day, once one thing is checked off, like I bring out a highlighter thing or something, and then I just highlight that pie or that slice of pie. And then I kind of progress, and it's like, it's something about it. Once it's clicked off and I'm like actually highlighting it out, it's a process or something I go through. Because I think at the end of the day, it's like we're trying to figure out how do we manage our energy, our time, and focus. And for me, when I'm able to see the progress that I'm making, even at the start of the day, it keeps me wanting to fill the pie, or what I say, eat the pie. So it's been really helpful for me. And I've just been incorporating that as well as what have you, just to part of my day. So today I'm literally looking at a circle on a piece of paper that looks like looks like a pie. Yeah, it looks like pie. I don't know if it'll show up, but like no, you probably can't see that. Dang it! I need to figure out how to do that.
If you back up.
Yeah, and if you turn it on an angle, we can almost see it. A little bit more. Yeah, you can kind of see it.
Yep, there it is.
We got a circle.
So I've got like, a quarter of my pie done for the day, which included connecting with the Heroic Council and another networking event I did. So it's like, and you feel good about it. It's like, I put this down because it's something I wanted to do. I made the time for it. Now it's complete, and I did it. I hopefully showed up as my best in that moment, and I'm going to move on to the next.
Yeah, I love it. And I like that you came up with your own system. And I think it's really important to emphasize that for people, because like I work with clients and I'm often giving them advice on like, here's a way to be more productive, or here's a way to be a better leader, or here's a way to all different sort of frameworks and things. And I think the thing that sometimes I don't do a good enough job of is explaining to people that this is not a recipe that you have to follow to the T. These are kind of helpful directions to point you in. So you don't like, if we give, for instance, we're talking about calendar blocking. I find that useful. Sarah finds that useful. Tim's finding that useful. Parshell, you're finding that useful, right? So that's something that's helpful. We all think that it's helpful, but it's not like it's a prescriptive thing that you can't be productive without calendar blocking. But all these sorts of things, whether you use Todoist or Asana or a paper to-do list or a circle, whatever it is, you have to find the system that works for you. I used to like in Asana how they had the flying unicorn whenever you got something done. That always made me feel good. But I appreciate that, like, you bring up that you have your own system that works for you. And I think hopefully that should give people a little bit of freedom, that you don't have to do what everybody else does. You don't have to use the software everyone else does. You don't have to do anything the way anybody else does. You have to find out what works for you. And what I would encourage is to focus on the principles. And I think the principle there that you're pointing to is you like the recognition in the form of like seeing the colors being filled in, right? Like that's the visual recognition for you that you're getting closer to your goal. So whatever it is that works for you, dear listener, that's the move, I think, is find the thing that works for you.
Hmm.
Tim, what about you? Taking it.
Sorry, Asana sent me their little characters. I'm Asana certified. Yeah, thank you. That's what flies across your screen when you get something done.
I think I have my stickers somewhere in a pack because I got my pack from them recently.
Oh, here's the orange.
Yeah, I think that's the one I kept out of all. I'm not sure if I kept the rest of the stickers or whatever. I think I have it somewhere. What about you? Anything you want to talk about that you're taking away from today's episode?
Yeah, I mean, like it's a reminder of how much more improvement I need to have. Like, yeah, whenever I talk to Sarah, I'm always like, so far behind. But and just like, and I was talking to you guys about this yesterday about just like making lists and writing things down. You know what I mean? And having something in a state where I can reference it pretty easily. It is something because I do so much just in my head, and I know that that's not just like potentially, you know, you're going to miss something, but it's also like kind of cognitively taxing. You know what I mean? To be storing and trying to reference things that are in your head all the time, because like you prefer to spend your mental energy on like doing creative things and doing stuff that's going to like actually stuff that you can actually accomplish, rather than being like, oh, you know what I mean, like what's that thing I was supposed to do, and then spend 10 minutes trying to like go through your mental files and find it, versus just being able to like reference a to-do list or your calendar or something like that. Not that I don't keep a calendar at all, but you know,
you're getting better with your calendar, and you're using Todoist more, so you're on the path. Remember, little incremental steps, man.
Yeah. No, I'm not like unhappy, but you know what I mean. But in general, it's always a reminder of how big of a disorganized person I am.
Well, as I'm evidence, you can turn from a P to a J. Well,
Yeah.
Sarah, I'm going to leave you with the last word on today. Any thoughts you want to wrap up with? But also, I want you to finish this off with telling us, since you're the honored guest of the day, it'd be helpful for you to tell us, what are you really into right now? I'm going to let you close out on that.
Yeah, I'm excited to have this segment because I think we're going to learn a lot of different tools and products that we like, which will be fun. So what I'm into right now is the show Get Organized with the Home Edit on Netflix. So shout out to those ladies on that show. I'm obviously a fan of clean and tidy workspaces. I was, I don't know if you can see behind me, but my books have been color coded long before they made it popular. So I'm just saying that might have been my idea. But the show is really interesting because it shows this aesthetic. I love this physical act of organizing, but I also appreciate the emotion behind the spaces and how our spaces make us feel. They're really addressing that. We're in our homes now more than ever. And of course, this show is about these material things, but it shows that the chaos that is going on with our physical things can actually be something that we're overlooking and we're not even realizing could be a potential problem for us. So just, bringing awareness to your physical space and how your physical space can really affect your mental health as well. So I love it. I'm into that show, definitely.
Right on. Well, I'm excited to watch it, although I'm a little bit nervous because organization shows are like crack to me. When I watch Marie Kondo, I'm like, oh, I need to clean my house. It's a little too much for me. I can't.
Yeah. I think the only thing is that you kind of make you have to go to the contain these expensive clear bins, which I love. I have a lot of so much of this you can really do with what you already have in your house, a shoe box, a box you already have. So it doesn't have to be this huge daunting thing. Again, start small.
I do that, but then I'm always like, oh God, these boxes don't match. And I know. It does it to me. So,
yeah.
All right. So before I wrap it up, any final words from anyone else on the council?
I'm just gonna say to not just find a way to not beat yourself up over this stuff at the same time, because I think that there's a balance that has to come into this, because you're trying to figure out yourself and you're trying to figure out how you can achieve your goals, and you have to make the time to do that stuff. So give yourself grace in the process too, and you'll
Also,
the solution will emerge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, like a lot of times, like you don't recognize the progress that you've made. You know what I mean? Like I can tell for myself, you know what I mean? On a day-to-day basis, I'm not really aware of the progress I've made in all these different areas. So like sometimes it feels like I'm standing still, you know what I mean? And not really moving forward. But like, if you really reflect back on like the last 3 years and compare like what your processes look like now versus what they look like 3 years ago, you'd probably be more impressed with yourself than you'd think.
Agreed.
Totally.
Well, on behalf of the Heroic Council, I want to thank all of you who are watching live, any of you who are watching live, and all of you who are watching after the fact that we're live, and any of you that will hopefully tune in at a later date for another episode. I just want to say thank you for watching us and spending some time with us. Don't forget to subscribe. You can subscribe in a lot of different places. If you go to superheroinstitute.org/heroic, you'll see all the different places that you can subscribe. This will soon be available following the release of this particular episode. We're going to be making it available live on every podcast platform you can think of. I just haven't put it up yet, but the pilot will be up there as well as this episode, so you'll be able to get this as a podcast and listen to it later on. You can always catch us every Friday, 1 o'clock in our Facebook group at you can find the link to that on superheroinstitute.org/heroic. But our Facebook group is our community where we talk about different things. You can ask the council a bunch of questions. You can connect with other superheroes and learn ways that if you have an ambition to change the world and make it a better place, you can find the people who will help you do it. And this Heroic Council is evidence that is a possibility, and that is the thing that happens. So please subscribe. Please tell your friends about it. Share these episodes if you like them. Always leave us a comment if you have something to say. All the good things. Do all the things. And if you're on YouTube, click the bell. That's the thing. Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button and the notification bell. Is that what they say? Is that what the kids are saying these days? Well, anyway, if you're thinking about tuning in next week, then I guess I would just say tune in next week as our superheroes cover productivity tools and find out if our heroes are in trouble or becoming more productive. And with that, we are out, people.